Marshall, it's good to see you. How you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
Awesome. I've been looking forward to our call for a while. Glad we're able to connect.
Same here, man. I love it. I always enjoy chatting with you, man.
Cool. Me too. Me too. Hey, I'd love to jump right in it, and I'd love for you to tell people what it is that you do for iHeartDogs.
Yeah, whenever I get this question, it's like there's so many things, as you know. But
Sure.
basically, Home Life Media is their umbrella brand, and Home Life Media operates e-commerce stores in different niches. And one of the biggest niches we operate in is the pets niche.
Okay.
Um, and so iHeartDogs is part of that. iHeartCats is part of that. We have a CBD brand called Canine.com, and then we also have a brand which Joe helps us with called Metal Paw. And then and then in addition, we have a separate brand that's not in pets. It's for people, it
Okay.
involves pets, and that's our veterans brand, and that's called the Hero Company. And that
Okay.
raises, and so all the pet side of it will give back in different ways. They do meals to shelters, they do toys to shelters, blankets to shelters. We do fundraising to save dogs and cats from death row. And then on the veteran side of it, we raise money for to fund service dogs for veterans with PTSD, so they have no out-of-pocket cost. So those
Wow.
are the brands.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your role specifically for that is? Do you have a way to define that?
Yeah, I co-founded the company about 8 years ago, and so
Okay.
my role there is the official title outwardly is president, but more of the visionary in the brand, and that's my internal seat is visionary,
Got it.
and yeah.
Cool. Very cool. So, I guess in the last 8 years, what are some of the accomplishments that you guys are the most proud of?
All right. Yeah. I look back, there's a ton. I'm really proud of a lot of things. We usually start off with, when I'm asked this question, I just start off with we fed over, I think, 25 million shelter
Okay.
animals. So what we consider meals. So 25 million meals have gone to shelters because we exist, which I
Wow.
think is incredible. We've sent over 800,000 blankets to shelters, over 100,000 toys to shelters. And so, and these are animal shelters that need it. We've flown animals, driven trains, however we can get them out of death row to somewhere
Okay.
they could be. So we've moved them. We calculate the miles. I think it's over 300,000 miles of travel
Wow.
we funded. And then in addition, we've raised over $600,000 for our veterans. So
Oh, wow.
those are a handful of the milestones we look at.
Sure.
And then from a business perspective, Inc. 500, Inc. 5000. We have 60 employees that work for us in teams around the world, and we're located in Anaheim, California, and we have our own fulfillment center. So all that's happened in 8 years.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that sounds like a busy 8 years.
Because I'll tell you, it started with two dudes in a coffee shop. So
Okay.
that's like the beginning, and then you guys get the end of it. So
Sure. No, yeah, that's really cool.
mm-hmm.
All right, let me ask you this. So over those 8 years, one of the things that I love about iHeartDogs, Home Life Media, is the fact that you guys have the give back component built into what you do. What would you say you've kind of learned from that? Kind of what are some of the biggest learning points you guys have learned from having that give back component built into your whole model?
Yeah, a lot of things. One is there's so many intrinsic things that happen when you build it into your DNA.
Okay.
So rather than just hey, we're doing this and this, we build it into everything we do. All our communication talks about our give back. Every product starts with, what are we going to do with this product to give back?
Sure.
So it does a lot of things. One is it creates an amazing culture. You attract people who want purpose in their work, and a lot of times they're very highly skilled. And a lot of times, and a lot of our, we're not paying the same. There's no way we could ever pay the same as Google, right? Or
sure.
Facebook or whatever, consuming, for different roles. We pay what we can. It's market, but we attract really high quality talent because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And a lot of them have done the corporate ladder thing, and so we have a lot of really great employees. All of them are amazing, but we get a lot of talent, and we attract a lot of talent with that ethos.
Okay.
And our turnover is very, very low. We have very low turnover.
Sure.
Another thing that happens consumer facing is our consumers we attract a certain type of consumer, a very generous consumer, and we can do more and
Okay.
more with them. That's been a huge win. And supporting a generous consumer is way easier and way better than supporting a stingy consumer, right?
Sure.
And so it gives us the ability to have amazing relationships with people that we serve. And so I think those two things, and also like when there's problems, people tend to be more gracious when they know ultimately you're doing something better for the world.
Sure.
So I think from all that perspective, it we get to work with amazing people for amazing people, and there's just level of understanding generally. So
Sure.
it just creates an environment that people want to be in and they want to be a part of.
Sure. That's really cool. I love how, I don't know, that picture you painted, it kind of goes from start to finish. So you have a new product. How is it going to give back? It affects your employees, kind of talent acquisition. It affects, your customers, a little bit more gracious, a little more understanding, more generous. So really helpful to see all those points. But yeah, my next question would be, kind of based on what you've seen, based on what you've learned, based on how it adds meaning to, your work life, your employees' work life, the whole company, the culture. Is a give back program something you would recommend for every business, or, kind of when have you seen it make sense and when have you seen it doesn't make sense? And what recommendation would you make to somebody listening to this?
Oh yeah, that's great. Great question, because I've seen it both ways. Like I've seen it work. I've seen it just really feel inauthentic.
Okay.
And so here's what I would say. This is, first of all, I think every brand should give back. I think there's circles of influence they have, and there's the ability that there's certain things that they have that other people don't have. Maybe it's they can source product really, really well. And part of their give back is them figuring out how to source product for a need that's important to them.
Okay.
But I think every brand should, like the word, I think business and giving back is one of the most powerful forces. It's like profitable philanthropy in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
So the way that I've seen it done well is where the brand and the team, the leadership team or the owners or whatever, have a cause that's close to them that they care about, because that will transfer through everything you do. Like if you're doing it just to do it, meaning like you're doing it without you really don't care, the consumer senses that. They just do. If it's something you care about, then it resonates. The second piece of that though is the consumer has to care about it. Your user has to, like your community has to. So like here's an example. We have people who love pets. They value the relationship with them. They value them, the value they add to their life, right? And they want to see them in the best place possible. So if that's our community. So when we do our give backs, it serves that community and it matters to us. If we went in there and said, "Hey, we're gonna take this thing, sell things, and give water somewhere," like something, a noble cause, like someone needs like a well somewhere,
planting
right?
trees, water, wells, all that kind of stuff.
Right. It would feel, even though it may make sense from a give back, it wouldn't be authentic to the community that we serve.
Sure.
So I think there's two pieces. One, you have to it has to matter to you as an owner, right? And it also has to matter to your community. And if you have those two things, then you can really you can integrate kind of a give back program or ethos into all you're doing, and it will have a substantial impact on you, on the business and all that. Because it really, where I feel the most from this is when it's like things get hard. So it's like, really, really tough. We look at the month, maybe we didn't make as much, maybe we lost money, like, these things that you wrestle with.
Sure.
But you realize, wow, no matter what, just existing, the world's a better place because of me. Like that definitely motivates you to continue going.
Sure.
And so I would say there's just a lot of intrinsic things too, but those two components are critical, I think, in my experience.
That makes sense. I love that. So it needs to be authentic to the business owner. You have to really believe in it. So if you believe in planting trees, then you should run with that. But it also needs to make sense to your customers. So it's super helpful, super practical. What about other things, practical things you've learned as far as, and I'm just going to kind of throw some numbers out there, but I've seen businesses who say $2 for every purchase goes to blank. And I've seen, X% of purchases goes to support, whatever. From an economic business model perspective, what have you found? I know you guys do very specific, like this supports 15 meals or whatever.
Yep.
And I would guess the specificity matters too, where you're just like, hey, a portion of proceeds goes to this. It's a little bit too, nebulous. But if, you say, hey, this purchase buys 15 shelter meals, like it's just much more real at that point. So what would you say you've learned as far as the numbers that do make sense and why and how to kind of make it more specific? What have you guys learned?
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, this is a big one we've learned. People care, ultimately, it's what is the impact you're making? And we found that people have different perspectives on the value of something. So like if I say hey, every dollar goes to charity, for one person, that's a lot. One person, that's too little. One person, that's, then it just gets into it detracts them from the purpose and puts them and has them focused on a metric. Percentage is the same thing. Like, so our veterans brand, 20% of whatever 20% goes to fund veterans. The reason that number is because the cost of marketing and the cost of product and to run the system basically eat up the rest of that, right? So the 20% makes sense because we want to show the consumer, we want to be clear about what their impact is, right? So you want to, but it also causes a lot of problems because some people are like, that's not enough, or like, hey, you're not giving enough. And it's like, well, how much do you give? Like, do you give 20%? Because probably not. So, and then they don't, they're not, the business owners not thinking, well, the cost of goods and the cost of marketing and the cost of staff and the cost of, housing inventory and shipping costs and all this stuff, right? So like when you give them people numbers, they, especially online, you tend to open a Pandora's box where it's like, some people think it's enough. It's never a consensus. However, when you focus on the impact and you can break it down to that level, like we're going to feed 15 shelter dogs, there's very little pushback. Like there's very little, because people are happy because that's ultimately what you're doing. So we try to, when it's possible, we try to break it down to something that people can just understand. So it's like, everyone you buy, we fund a toy for a shelter. Bam. Everyone you buy, we fund a blanket for a shelter. 15 dogs are fed. And what that does is it lets people focus on their impact. And also from a record keeping standpoint, what we're able to do is actually record how much they've done. So we give them report cards. So they'll say every month, they'll say, hey, since you've been part of our community, you fed 150 shelter dogs. Like we keep cumulative totals. So it really helps with that stuff and messaging. But ultimately, I think that if you can, and sometimes it's difficult, like I said, with our veterans brand, it's difficult because the cost of dogs is so substantial. We can't be like, hey, you funded 1/100th of a dog. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So
I'm guessing it costs like $10,000 to train a dog.
It's like 30 to 35,000, depending on like their really the trauma that they've experienced, like how the PTSD. So it's like very difficult to be like, we're taking fractions of a transaction, but they're adding up substantially. So that's 20%, and it's a battle we have to fight, but we're okay with that because it's the people who really care about it are like, I'm in. People who want to fight about it and argue about it, they're not in any ways, so we ignore them. Like it's we're here to help the guys and the women who fought for us, right? So like that's where our head is. But going to a metric, I will say that if you can break it down to the impact number and focus on that, then you're substantial. You have so much, you have so much less friction than if you're trying to. And also, I think we're used to like buying things and say 10% of this and 10% of that, and we don't really know. So we also try to close the loop. So for like 15 dogs or 15, meals are sent to shelters, we can also showcase that in a visual or a video to show them like, hey, here's your real impact. Like we said you did it, and here it is. So it works really well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's helpful. I'm not sure that everybody would always be able to do it, but focusing on impact versus dollar, that all makes sense.
Right.
Have you seen any instances where kind of going this route has kind of backfired or not made sense for somebody? I'm just curious because I know you talk to other brands and kind of advise on this and stuff like that. So I'm just curious kind of, when have you seen it really make sense? And when have you seen where I mean, have you ever seen that it backfires? I'd love to know kind of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, because I would say that it does. Like you're either gonna have a front-facing kind of a give back program, or you're gonna have kind of a back-facing, meaning like it's something you do that, because here's the reality too, is like some brands, like, okay, here's an example. We have our CBD brand, and so when people use CBD for their dog, it's really
Sure.
it's because they want to solve a real and present problem
Right.
that is impacting them and their dog's life.
Sure.
The shelter give back is kind of like, that's cool, but I want the solution. Like, so
Yeah.
so what I found is when you're selling very, very solution oriented things, the give back isn't as important. And so to the consumer, because they just want solutions, right?
Mm.
So in that scenario, if you try to go too hard, you override the purpose, right? So it's
Mm.
like, hey, hey, you give back. It's like, and the consumer is fighting through that to be like, okay, yeah, but like, I want the answer, I want the
Sure.
solution. So if you have a very high solution focused brand, like very solution oriented, like you're solving a real present problem,
Yeah.
then you don't have to, then the strength of your give back program, like you don't want to have the consumer to fight through that to get the solution. You can have it
Mm.
present, but it could also be more of a back, like, hey, as one of our ethos is giving back, and this is how we do
Sure.
it. And just by being a consumer with our brand and in solving this problem, we're also doing this together. So it's all the strength of messaging, I think it comes down to. So, but I think that high solution brands that solve a really present like problem, they're solution oriented. It can detract from that messaging in a negative way if you're trying to hammer like a something louder than that. Like if you're trying to really push the give back way beyond that, when people are consumers just like, that's cool, but
Sure.
then it can actually be detrimental in a way.
Okay. Yeah. So it can kind of get in the way if people have to wade through it, and
Yep.
you emphasize it more than kind of what they're paying attention to.
Yeah, totally.
That makes sense. What are I'm curious, what are some give back programs, other brands that you've seen that you really like? Maybe some brands that you guys pay attention to and model from and learn from. Anyway, are there any other brands out there that you really admire and kind of like what they're doing with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I love, there's two, because I think there's two different types of programs. There's like when dealing with products
Sure.
specifically, so not services, products. One
Yep.
is you're selling a product you're making somewhere with margin, and then you're contributing something that matters to you in the community, right?
Yep.
And so like I think that's really cool when it comes to solving problems for community. So like there is like one of the brands I think that I think is really cool is where the I can't remember the name of it, but I think it's called 4Ocean, right? Where they're
Oh
like
yeah.
basically you buy a bracelet and it funds a pound of trash out of the oceans. Example,
Right.
exactly,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
tangible, and you can see a pound of trash. Like you can be like, oh,
Mhm.
that's cool. You can envision like that's going because I'm wearing this. Like
Sure.
that's so real. I think
Yeah.
that's cool. The other way that people get back to product is actually through the product itself. So like how it's made. So like there's brands who are like, hey, we're gonna hire widows in India to make this product and bring it to you. And just by participating in the brand, you're
Mm.
helping that. And I think that's another way that I think is really
Sure.
awesome when you can do that, where like you can actually like you can actually activate the individuals in the economy you want to help in
Sure.
a commercial way that
Yeah.
benefits them, and then the consumer can be part of that journey. So I
Yeah.
think those are the two ways I've seen it. I've seen it done with widows in India, for example. That was really
Mm.
awesome, where they
Yeah.
would make that they would sew. I think it was like women's pants,
Mhm.
like almost like pajama bottom style kind of stuff. I can't remember the brand, but like the point is, like I remember being like, that is really cool because you're connecting all the dots through the supply chain,
Sure.
and there's impact there. And you
Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
yeah,
Yeah, one
so
of the ways I describe that is you're kind of just adding different layers to your brand. And,
mhm.
it's not always necessary, but I think anytime you can add another layer, it might be your story as the founder. It just kind
Yep.
of adds a little bit more to the brand, or,
Mhm.
like you said, something that gives back where, hey, you already like the product, the bracelets for Ocean, but it kind
Mhm.
of gives you that extra reason to buy it and support it because you identify with it. But anyway, I like that last thing you mentioned, which is
Mhm.
sometimes it comes out of the supply chain. We had a client who made bassinets in West Africa.
Yep.
And the fact that, she's supporting artisans there it's a really big deal. They really are, she really cared about it and it meant a lot to her. And so she made that part of her brand. And again, people don't buy just for that reason, but it adds kind of more and more layers that just kind of makes your brand more rich. So I think that's, kind of what these opportunities provide for brands.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally. I think you're on the money. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay. So, I guess maybe one of the question would be from what you guys do. And again, you guys have a lot of experience. You've been doing it 8 years, more experience than most brands as far as giving back programs. I know you've learned a lot. What have you found are kind of maybe like the top 3 or top 5 ways to communicate this with your customers? So what works well? As far as like end of year videos and emails and kind of what works best for you guys?
Yeah. So like, it's kind of the way that I would present this is to think about it like a tapestry.
Okay.
And so you want that thread woven through everything at some level. So like basically you want a consistent communication plan or verbiage, the way you say it, how you say it, reinforced in every touch point possible. Okay. The only place where you may or may limit that is ads, just because like there's only so much communication there, right? Like before you lose the consumer. But what you want to do is whatever it is, you just want to weave it into everything. So it could be as simple as an image in the bottom of, like, we have an image at the bottom of our receipt emails that says like you shop. It's like, I think it says you shop, we give, dogs are saved. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So like just consistently in everything you do. So it should be on site. It should be visible, and the emails, like, it doesn't have to be the focus of it, but you want it to be, and sometimes it will be, right? Because you're like, you want to announce that, but you want the consistent, like, you want consistent communication, whether it's the forefront or in the back of what you're doing from an impact standpoint.
Sure.
So I think ultimately that, and that could look a lot of different ways, but you want, whether it's, I would say one thing we're learning too is like we're getting better and better at is how, like, for example, signatures in the company. Like, does every signature have impact? Like every little touch point to consumer or a brand or a peer, like a peer group or like whatever, or not, like you want it to be consistent and woven through the organization. That also creates authenticity and trust, because people you're reinforcing this. I think a lot of organizations, that's where they fall short, is like they'll have an initiative and it'll be over here on this landing page or on this part of the site, but it's not way over here and the consumer forgets about it. But when you consistently like just talk about it, it becomes, the consumer sees you, they like as that, and it defines your ethos, and then you attract that consumer. You build more loyalty and trust from that.
That makes sense.
I know there's like that could be, and so I think that itself could be multi-step. So you said 3 to 5. It could be, hey, we're gonna put in all our emails, we'll put this in our signature. Like, so it could be multifaceted, but just that concept is something I think the brands that do it well will benefit greatly. And I think that we're moving to a world from the e-commerce standpoint where brands are more important than they ever been. And the consumer is more informed and more pays more attention than they ever have. So I think it'll become more and more important to make sure that like whatever you're communicating becomes kind of woven in everything that you're doing.
Sure. That makes sense. I love 2 things you said kind of really helped. One is that picture of the thread kind of going through all of your marketing. So I was expecting kind of like at the end of the year, we put together a video and a landing page and it really communicates. But, like you mentioned, it's really more about weaving it into everything you do. So working it into your ads, working it into your emails, your product pages, your homepage, your email signatures. How do you kind of make it a thread that gets woven in? But I also love what you mentioned, where it's not always the primary focus. So, you might lead with a product, or your email might be about a certain offer. And it's not like it's always front and center, but the footer of the email or whatever, the footer of the site, the bottom of the product page, it's always going to mention it. So I just think that's great advice. It's not like one kind of magic silver bullet, but kind of finding a way to weave it into everything and make it part of, just your brand communication for everything that you do.
Yeah, it's part of your story. So
Sure.
it should go everywhere you're talking, So
Yep.
yeah, and I think and just to to close that thought, I think a lot of people get stuck because they're like, I don't know where to start. You can start really
Okay.
small. So you don't have to you don't have to create a major objective of communication that requires so much that you can't get started. You can
Sure.
just start by breadcrumbing it, just
Okay.
literally weaving the tapestry through okay, can I put something in my footer to talk about what we've done? Can I put it in the signature? Can I put it in the footer of an email? Can I put it in that, so I think that from what I would say is just to get started, if you have and so a lot of brands will do this to some extent. A lot of times I discover it by asking, not
Sure.
because they're not publicizing that they're doing that. And that's actually, they're losing a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to get started. So just,
Sure.
you can just think about we weave it through everything, and you can get in some places be stronger, but if it's consistently through everything, then the consumer will pick it up. And there's a lot of stuff that happens from that.
Sure. No, that's really cool. What else would you recommend, someone who's thinking about getting started, or they're starting a brand and thinking about baking it in? What would be, anything we haven't talked about, kind of what are some of the top things you'd recommend thinking about as they consider getting started?
From a product brand standpoint, or from just like a give back standpoint?
Either one. Yeah, whatever.
Because there's a lot. There's a lot there. We need 3 more hours. Okay, so I would say, let's see. There's actually a lot there. I mean, and it's a really good question. I think, and since we're talking about the give back, I think you want to do any give back. So if you're going into market and you're selling a unique product or service, which really is what we're talking about, because if you're just drop shipping or something like that, then you don't have control of the brand, and it's not yours really. Yeah. So unique product or service. So we start from there. I think what you want to do is find a way to message it in a way, if you're going to do a give back, find a way to message it in a way that's a bit unique too.
Okay.
Because for example, we fund meals for shelter dogs, like that phrase meal, or we call it full belly meal. That is our thing. Now other people say, hey, we fund bowls of food or something. And we feel like for us, that was a little more, we could have used that, but it felt more disconnected. So what I would say is, if you're building it, try to figure out how to make it unique to you. The way you communicate it is really important. So you want to make sure that is authentic. It's also fits your brand, but also unique, right? Because it's you're going to be competing. But ultimately, this is another area I see people fail, is they feel like the cause will drive marketing.
Okay.
The cause will make people buy their stuff, even though it's identical to other people's. That will not happen. It's not a charity, right? So you have to have a unique, distinct quality product or service with a great value proposition. That's the core.
Sure.
If you just trying to sell the same thing white labeled with a give back, you're going to fail. It's just not going to happen. It just doesn't work. Because the consumer understands that you're trying to convince them with cause, not product.
Yeah.
And that feels very inauthentic, So I think you just be careful for that. That's what I would say.
Sure. How would you describe that? I mean, so it's kind of more of a bonus. People have to buy into your product, buy into your service. It has to be unique, strong value prop. They have to want it to begin with, and they have to realize you're not just doing it to try to make a buck off of them, but is there a way you would define that, or is it just something you have to think about?
Well, I will give a visual. Here's the visual I would say is with a rocket, you have the whole body and you have the accelerant, right? And I feel like that's the offering of a business. The tip of it is more of the give back, where it's it sits on this system. And it helps actually with the trajectory of the system, right? But it doesn't lead. You know what I mean? It doesn't drive the machine, right? You have combustion that drives a rocket, right? So you gotta have that. If you don't have that figured out, it doesn't matter what the rocket does. It looks like it doesn't go anywhere. So that combustion is the marketing, is the value proposition, the product or service you have that actually will deliver for the consumer. And then the tip of it, the rocket, which is actually does create it takes what's already happening and makes it more efficient,
Yeah.
is really I see the give back. So
Mm,
I think the key is you want to make sure that you have a great product or service, and then when you bring it to you're going to do a give when you're going to give a program or do a give back, again, it becomes part of the entire strategy to drive the
sure.
organization further and have meaningful impact and purpose. But it has to. You can't ignore the basics, right?
Mm,
But once you have the
that's
basics,
awesome.
yeah, once you have the basics there,
Yeah.
then you really come in and say, okay, how do I weave this into the ethos of everything we're doing?
Hmm.
And then it becomes just like a part of how you operate, right?
Sure.
So hopefully that answered that question.
No, yeah, I love that example. I think it's super helpful because, like you said, I think I've seen people kind of talk about it or think about it where they think the give back is going to be the rocket fuel,
Yeah,
um,
that's
and so, but yeah, so it's not going to be the thing that makes you take off. But I love that, example of it's the tip. It streamlines it, makes it a little bit easier, kind of makes the direction a little bit easier. And yeah, so kind of a little bit more of a streamlining, but that's helpful.
yep.
Don't create a give back program thinking it's going to be the rocket fuel that makes you take off,
Mhm.
but it's just going to be kind of that tip that makes it a
Yep.
little bit easier and kind of sets the direction a little bit more.
Yeah, and honestly, I've seen so much failure at that point. Like I've seen a lot of failure from people where, like, it fails because they don't have a great product or service. They just have a great
Sure.
cause,
Yeah.
and which is and it's like it's hard to tell them like, hey, you're just selling widget A with a
Right.
great cause. Like you have like that's not enough to drive
Hmm.
uh like long-term commerce.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think I see that a lot. So here's the thing: sometimes you come with two different ways. One is you come with a product or service. You're like, hey, this is awesome. I want to do it. It's
Yep.
great. And then it's like, okay, I want to build something in my brand that has purpose. Like that's one
Yep.
way. The other way is you come the other way. Say, hey, my heart is here. I really care about this cause.
Mm,
Okay. And that's always a little bit harder because
mm,
you're trying to make a business fit. But when you come that way, you just have to be careful that that's not that ultimately the like good decision making and business acumen
sure.
is ultimately drives right the rocket versus like, well, that's okay. Like people will understand because I'm doing
Mm,
good stuff.
sure.
So but you can come from both ways.
Yeah.
It's just you just got to be careful which way you come from.
And like you mentioned, if you go the second way and you do it wrong, it becomes more of a charity, and people might as well
Mhm.
donate to something as opposed to buying something they don't want, just so
Yeah.
a small percentage goes to it. So,
Totally. That's what I
uh,
tell people is like maybe do you need a nonprofit? Like the reality is like
sure.
does it need to be a business or should you have a nonprofit?
Yeah.
Because I mean that's a lot easier to do
Hmm.
than like convince people to give you 100% so you can give 10% and then deal with
Right.
all the headache
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever it
Right.
is.
Yeah. Makes sense. That makes sense. Well, hey, this has been super helpful.
Yeah,
Appreciate you coming on, and
always,
yeah, I think
man.
there's a lot here. Obviously, there's a lot more to talk about, but I'd love to know. Give you just a minute now that we're wrapping up. Love to know what's next for iHeartDogs and kind of what you guys are excited about with what you have going on.
Yeah, no, there's always a lot going on. For us, I think the one big focus for us in 2022, which is what we're looking down, is more predictable income. I think every business in e-commerce is because with the advertising and product, we've gotten really good at that over the past
Sure.
5-6 years with Facebook and the access to data and the access
Hmm.
to easy supply chain and I think that'll continue. But I think brands are really starting to look for like long-term revenue or
Okay.
predictable revenue. I think that's also to us. We're going to looking to grow our predictable revenue because that obviously just makes we call it slows down the treadmill a little bit, right? When you have
Okay.
whether it be a subscription revenue, whether it be residual income from something like all that. So I think we're going to focus. I think a lot of brands will. I also think that we're looking at the market itself in the first quarter because there's going to be a lot of brands that just don't make it out of this last year.
Okay.
Like there's a lot of brands bet on Q4 pretty hard because the year was
Mm,
really mixed, and there's definitely a strong wind in our sales in 2020 from e-commerce, and
okay.
then it kind of like settled out in 2021. And so
Sure.
I think a lot of brands invested for growth and it wasn't there a large
Mm.
amount. So in the first quarter this year, what we're looking at is we're looking at brands themselves, and we're looking at our brands and others to see if there aren't strategic acquisitions we can make, or
Okay.
strategic opportunities that open in the market because other brands fall out. Strategic partnerships where a brand says, "Hey, you know what? Like I can only get so far. Maybe there's something we can do
Sure.
from a synergy standpoint." So we're looking at all those things. And really trying to read the room, in
Yeah.
2022. But I think the name of the game will be finding sources of somewhat predictable revenue, revisiting. I think a lot of brands revisit search and SEO.
Okay.
And so we'll be doing the same thing. And then really revisiting. I think it's less about new things for a lot of brands. It's more about trying to go deep in the things that you already do well.
Sure.
And that's kind of what we're looking at.
Got it. Very cool. What about a link or whatever? Where would you recommend people go to learn more?
Homelifemedia.com. You can go there. And that has all our stuff on there, and way to get a hold of us and all that. So you can check us out there.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks, Marshall. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, Joe. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Talk soon.